some Olas Riesling.
Oh, okay, perfect. And I'm drinking tea. What a shame. Okay, so but
You're in
but
quarantine. You're allowed.
but I have something else
Oh,
at my
what
hand.
do you
So
have there?
it's actually, yeah, unfortunately nothing Hungarian. It's Veronese Corvina actually.
Oh, cool.
I like it because it's you doesn't have to eat something with it, or not
Yeah,
necessarily. It's kind of lighter, more like acidity driven. It's yeah.
yeah. And you've got the, you know, Matthias Corvinus. Do you want to make it a connection to Hungary?
Yeah, why not? Exactly. Okay. So,
Sure.
Alec Danch, welcome
Hello.
to the welcome to the podcast, and good to finally see your face, man. Welcome to the show.
Likewise. Thank you. Thank you for having me.
And please, just if you could introduce where you are actually, and maybe introduce your business, and also just a little introduction where are you in the wine world actually?
Yeah. So we're based in California. I have a small importing company called Danch and Granger Selections with my business partner Catherine, and we focus primarily on Central Eastern Europe. So Hungary is kind of the foothold, and then we've branched out to all the neighbors. So we've got some from Slovakia, some from Austria, Serbia, Croatia, Slovenia, little Bosnia, and actually next year we'll have a little bit from Romania. So kind of not really a firm idea of what we wanted when we started, but we make connections and the relationships, and we just kind of followed where we found the best people, the best farming, and our favorite wines.
Mm-hmm.
And my history is a little bit odd. It's not like I graduated college and thought I'm going to start an Eastern European wine importing company. It was a mixture of, I lived in Europe for a couple years, both for school and for work, between Copenhagen and Rome. And then I had worked in restaurants prior to that to pay through college, including a restaurant in California called the Ranch House, which had already been open for over 40 years when I arrived, and it's still open. And the Somm on the floor, Michael Denny, had already been on the floor at the Ranch House longer than I had been alive at that point. So it was this pretty deep, 7 to 1,000 label wine list. And every night, by that time I was washing dishes. I was 15 and or 16. And every night he would brown bag 3 or 4 wines. And he'd invite anyone from the kitchen crew to come out and guess the wines and talk about the wines. And he weaved so much story and history and fun facts that it stuck with me. And that was like my first experience with wine. But and then Europe kind of consolidated that quite a bit. Obviously, Copenhagen is such a food wine centric place, despite not being able to grow anything. I mean, I guess climate change is changing that slowly, but at least then it wasn't well known. And then when I got back to the States, I actually worked for a circus for about 6 years. Kind of a dinner theater, vaudeville, Circus Olay kind of thing. And a lot of the performers were from Central Eastern Europe. So we had, Ukrainians and Russians and Bulgarians and, people who escaped the Soviet era by joining these circuses, and now they're on these shows. And we had some celebrities as well. But after the show, this is like a 3-hour nonstop show where I was actually, in makeup, in costume, doing dances, routines, but also it was a restaurant. So I was serving wine underneath the trapeze, crouched at a table, pouring some, Rioja for somebody. And after the show, we would all sit around the tent and drink and eat. And you heard, again, kind of like at the Ranch House, it was this combination of stories, unique foods, history, culture, languages, and it made everything taste better. So one of my first pairings was like a honey peppered Ukrainian vodka, which one of our jugglers, Sergey, always had in his pack when he was part of the show. And he would juggle, play the accordion, and then open up his fresh, whole pickled tomatoes or pickled mushrooms and sing and pour me the honey peppered vodka. And I was like, what's better than this? And then after that, I broke into some wine internships. So I worked for a kind of, at the time, and now, a pioneering kind of natural wine winery in California called A Donkey and Goat, which actually I think you can find in Europe here and there. And they were doing stuff back in 2010 that is kind of mainstay now, but was very new back then. Pet nats and skin contact wines and, that kind of thing. And then I worked for some custom crushes in Napa, which was a very different experience. So kind of getting the two ends of the spectrum, aiming for 100-point cabs and then making skin contact Roussan from the foothills is a big divide. And that's where I got introduced to Frank and Zuzana, who were the owners and founders of Blue Danube Wine Company. And with them, it was this kind of a unique thing where they were importing these amazing wines from Central Eastern Europe, having both lived between in the area, including Budapest. And they wanted to build a sales team in the Bay Area. So I was completely green, but I had wine experience and I had this European experience. So now it was just time to do the wine selling part. But I had no idea. I bought a wine bag. I opened up the wines. I got in my car and I just started to go to restaurants and wine shops and go, do you want some ferment? So it was a very, very cold, slow start, but they were immensely supportive and also took me to the wine regions for the very, very first times. And that was back in, I think, 2011 or 12, we started travel. And it just really opened things up for me. And you build the market over time, you travel, and it's just stuck. And they retired after a good 17-year run, about a year and a half ago. And I was able to kind of take what I wanted from Blue Danube and transition what I didn't want, because obviously in 17 years, the wine world has changed quite a bit. And it was their company. I wasn't I wasn't in charge. And now my business partner, Catherine, and I are kind of doing the next generation of that kind of, idea of going to this part of the world and bringing it back. So that's kind of the somewhat long version of how we got to where we are.
Well, I think it's already worth a movie. Wow. But so now you have this company set up with Catherine?
Yes.
And how did you meet her?
She was actually also working with Blue Danube at the time, helping them with kind of logistics and kind of general project management. And then she's actually born and raised in France and was going to Europe. So she also went on some of the wine trips and got exposed to the countries. And she kind of wanted to embark on this second career. And she's been, absolutely essential in getting this off the ground, because I'm responsible for the portfolio and all the sales. And, working with the container logistics, the US government, the various European governments, it is a quagmire of paperwork and procedures and everything else. And she's able to just streamline it and actually physically get the wines here. Which, getting wines out of somewhere like Serbia or Romania is not, it's not particularly easy.
Yeah.
It's not like, the heavy EU consolidation you see in France and Italy, where things are just kind of streamlined. It's a whole new ballgame over there.
And I guess it doesn't make it easier that we are talking about alcohol, right? So
yes,
it kind of falls into the same category as cocaine, maybe.
It's alcohol. It's from where. Even applying for the labels. People don't know, the place, the name, the grape. It's just, the whole thing is tricky. And I think without Catherine's help, it'd be almost impossible. And also, she learned a lot from watching Blue Danube go through the trials and errors of trying to get these wines here. So yeah, I think sometimes the producers don't realize, they sell us the wine and 4 months later it arrives, and they have no concept that it takes that long to get wines here. So
what are the main difficulties? Because I would guess, as a complete green, as you said, to the wine importing business in the US, that maybe from the EU countries it's a bit easier, But just looking at your portfolios, like Bosnia and Serbia, they are not in the EU. So, uh, as you said, it takes 4 months. But how? What are the main difficulties, basically?
It's just all the added costs that go into it. You find a good wine somewhere, but if you have to pay a private trucker to bring it in and then have it kind of, established in one of the warehouses of the country that is being exported from, it's just a whole a litany of things that I think a lot of countries in Western Europe don't have to deal with, because either it's paid for by the state or there's
Mm.
different appellation systems that kind of can contribute. So yeah, so like when I actually buy the wine from somewhere in Bosnia or Romania, or maybe Romania is in the EU, but or Serbia, yeah, it's logistically, you know, too much of the money is actually going into the transport and import than it actually is the wine. And these aren't exactly easy categories. No one opens up a wine shop and goes, okay, we've got our Pinot Noir, our Chardonnay, but how's our Serbian section looking? So you have to, it's just a lot of added layers, I think. And it's
Mm.
also, we're learning how to consolidate, which is, getting an Austria only container, trying to do what we can within Hungary to bring in stuff from Slovakia or even Romania or Serbia, having a Balkan only. But again, then you have to buy enough wine from enough producers to fill that container, because the container is one cost. You can roll one bottle to the end of it, it's the same price.
Yeah.
Or you fill it to the point where you're slamming the door shut. You know what I mean? So how do we buy enough wine from all these different people and get it over here in a meaningful way, but also sell it fast enough to pay them all back?
Hmm.
With some of the producers we work with, we're buying 50, 60, 70% of their production. If I default, that is, horrible.
Mm.
So I got to kind of have it, you want to grow responsibly, but also make sure you pay everyone back. And also I have to get paid over here. And, with COVID and the restaurant closures, we had, tens of thousands of dollars of products sold, and we weren't getting paid.
Mm.
So, and as an importer, you kind of have to be 3 or 4 months ahead of where you are. I might be selling these wines, but I'm already thinking about, well, these wines are going to run out by this point, or I need more wines.
Mm.
You got to be in this, especially in 2020. How the hell do you predict 2, 3, 4 months ahead? This year is just an absolute. It's impossible to predict.
True.
So it's
Yeah.
been a very interesting. I think this year will be the year, if anyone can survive this year, that's a good vote for going forward in the future.
Yeah. It's also true maybe that you aged maybe in this 1 year, maybe 10 years, but then you
Yes,
have such a thick of an armor
yes.
that you can survive everything.
Yeah, I think I've definitely the company's been stressed at a point where it's got some grays along the edges already, which is probably a good thing. And we've
Yeah.
learned some really important lessons. And also I would say one of the silver linings of this is that I've had to go back to a lot of producers and just be incredibly transparent, honest, and
Mm.
we've actually connected more on a personal level this year. Even just having late night Zooms or WhatsApp conversations about kids and family and school and how's it going. And I think the more we have an emotional connection, the business obviously needs to follow, but I think everyone's been so flexible. We had a producer in Hungary, in Somló, who happened to have sold some property just before COVID really hit and shut things down here. And he said, you know what? We're okay on money for a little while. Why don't you extend your payment terms an extra, 4 or 5 months?
Mm-hmm.
That's just, and you multiply that times 30 or 40 different producers who made different arrangements for us. It kind of, it was a good litmus test to see the quality of people we're working with, not just the quality of the wines.
Mm.
And I'd like to have those kind of be on par going forward.
And you are actually located in California, right?
Yeah, so I'm in Sacramento, so kind of the middle of the state, and then Catherine lives in the South Bay, so just about in the 45 minutes south of San Francisco, and all the wines are warehoused in kind of south of Napa.
Okay. And then Because there are also different state laws in the US, right? So if you want to import in New York, maybe you have to pay, I guess, different taxes, right? And different administration
It's
procedures.
almost, think of it as like 50 different countries. So
Uh-huh.
each state has its own licensing requirements, its own warehousing requirements, its own price posting. It's a bit of a mess, and we don't really have a big national distribution model.
Mm,
One, because I have three young children, and I don't want to be kind of the regional sales manager dad, where
mm,
I'm on a plane a week and a half, 2 weeks every year, every month. But also, a lot of the producers that we work with are, as you know, Hungary in particular is a highly fragmented wine landscape, because of the way, I mean, not to get into the weeds of, how land was dispersed after the fall of communism, but it was this, the average holding is, 1 to 3 hectares. You got somewhere like, even like the aforementioned Shomlo is just over 500 hectares. There's over 1,000 winemakers. And again, there's a couple big players, but the idea of like getting a wine that I think meets kind of the quality of the farming and the story, you're just not going to get enough wine to spread it out that thin. But I do hope to expand into a little bit. And actually, we have a great partner in Oregon, and that's been a really great relationship. So, and things are getting better. And there's people are producing more wines, higher quality wines, and we're also finding more and more people. I mean, I remember going to, especially Hungary, 8 or 9 years ago, and we tasted some pretty, you know, not quite their wines, and it was relatively easy to find kind of what were the best players in certain areas. And now it's like, just between Instagram and everything else and traveling there, it's like there's way too much for us even to deal with, which
mm.
is a good problem to have. But also, how do you keep growing with your existing producers, and then also innovate and keep things fresh with where the countries are going?
Hmm.
I mean, Serbia wasn't even really on the wine map back then. And even Slovakia was, barely represented. Now there's, entire festivals in Slovakia, and obviously
Hmm.
Czech as well. So it's just, how do we kind of stay current and let people know that we're kind of seeking these things out, but also grow in a way that's responsible.
True. And I think this is what it's really great about your portfolio, because I'm being a Hungarian, and also, to be honest, I never worked as a sommelier in Hungary, so as I have to
Yeah.
say. But just looking through your portfolio, I mean, 2/3 of them are kind of unknown to me, and I think that's really admirable that you find these little producers and don't go for the for the big names, what almost every Hungarians know, kind of, and also with a big production scale. And this is, I think, pretty rare to find in a US market, because most of the people are, just look up, as you said, on Instagram, who has the most followers, who can sell maybe the most bottles, who I can
Yeah.
really, yeah, relate to also business wise, and yeah, who I can really trust that they can deliver the same quality the next year, right? So how do
It,
you
it's
how
also, yeah, I mean, it's also a highly selfish affair for me. Like, I living in California, I'm used to traveling to the big flashy wineries in Napa and Sonoma and elsewhere. And the best trips I've ever had to wine country here, whether it's the foothills or Mendocino or whatever, is actually sitting in someone's living room or going out to the backyard with the kids running around, tasting experiments, tasting food that they've grown in addition to the wine. And I feel like when I travel to Central Eastern Europe, the places that I really want to visit tend to be those places, as opposed to someone who could churn out, maybe a decent amount of Cab Franc or whatever from the south of Hungary. I'm more interested in like someone who's producing, old vine Kadarka near Mohacs, which again, most Hungarians would be like, what and what? Um, and also, I think that in Hungary, but even so in Croatia and Slovenia, and I would say less so in Austria, the producers might not even know each other that well. I mean, sure, in an appellation like Tokaj, you go taste with someone we work with like Charlotte Nobilis, and then we go see Samuel at Tinon, or Zoli at Demeter, or any number of people, right? Or Judith at Patpinse, or Stephanie at Kikilet. They all know each other, and oftentimes they hang out under the same, veranda in the vineyards at like Kakash or something like that. They see each other. But how many producers in Tokai know the producers in Chopron, or know those producers in outside in like Saxard or Hayoshbaya? Though it's not as connected in some ways. So it's fun to actually bring wines from within the country and share them with people, and they're like, "What? What is this?" I brought some wines from Barabash on the eastern side of Hungary, near the Ukrainian border, to some producers in Hayosh, and they were like, "What? What is this? They're making these kinds of wines over there." And I think also, to me, Hungary, as you know, is not a huge country, geographically or otherwise. There are wineries in California that produce more wine than Hungary as a whole, right?
Yeah.
To put it in perspective, right? Napa is considered relatively niche, and that's probably larger than the largest single appellation in Hungary.
Yeah.
It's like taking all the Kunschag together. And Napa is considered this minute part of California.
Yeah.
But to me, driving 6-7 hours is not that uncommon. So for me, if I want to go and really dig out somewhere deep, I think that's a different mindset than I think people have.
True.
So
that's what I wanted to say as well, because for what you said now, because in Tokaj and Sopron is really two different places in Hungary. So it's really in my mind, as a Hungarian living in Austria, I say that Tokaj is so far from Lake Balaton, but it's 3-4 hours. But for you, it's a cat spring, right? No.
Yeah. People in California drive that far to pick up their grapes,
Yeah.
So other thing is like I remember early going to Hungary and looking at, I always go to the wine shops or even some of the bigger box stores like, Tesco or something like this, and seeing, where a lot of the wines people are buying in Hungary are.
Mm.
But even thinking like, even like some place like the Matra, not known for its, artisanal flair. But there, of course, is things happening in the Matra. And I would say that, this is a fact that no one cares about here. But like I think we have the largest Matra portfolio in the States, with 3 producers, mind you. But, what is happening there, I think even most Hungarians don't know about. In fact, there's even like a new Matra campaign happening in Hungary right now. So I think not being of the area is my advantage in some ways. Like my ignorance can kind of let me explore areas I think maybe other people would overlook.
True, I'm sure. And just maybe a sentence about Matra, because 2 or 3 years ago, I was at a tasting in Hungary, in Budapest, at this Vince Bor Festival. That's kind of the biggest tasting event.
Yeah.
And I think if there is one place in Hungary where you can drink good Pinot Noir and good Kadarka, that's kind of, I think, similar in terms of weight.
Yeah, definitely.
And that's really the Matra, I think, with this volcanic soil and the kind of higher elevation, and really refreshing and not this overwhelming what maybe comes from Villan or Sexad sometimes. It's a bit more power, a bit more spice, but it's really a sexy, elegant kind of Pinot Noir and Kadarka from Matra. So just one sentence, maybe. But so how do you look up these producers? How do you assemble your portfolio, basically? Because you said it's like kind of everything connected, but I mean, I know my homeland, so they maybe 90% of the people don't even speak English. So how do you communicate with these people?
And I don't speak Hungarian, and I'm learning German, but it is a slow process. Yeah, I mean, early on, we actually had a Hungarian-born guy, Norby, who actually briefly worked for Blue Danube, and then he moved back to Hungary with his family, and he's there currently. And I remember, calling him up a few times, being like, because he was also working in the wine business in Budapest and elsewhere, and he became kind of like our facto translator, because you're right. I mean, even though I could kind of get the nuts and bolts per se, maybe in German, how much wine do you have? I'd like to taste these wines. I'd like to do this. But as Hungarian is this ridiculously floral, poetic. I have no idea what goes on. And people talk for 5 minutes, and then, they translate 5 words into English for me. So I don't know what the middle part is. But with someone like Norby or other people or even other winemakers who wanted to come along with us, like, hey, I'd love to come to see what's going on. That's when you get kind of let into the cellar a little bit deeper. Or once you join the family table, they start popping other bottles, or you just dig a little bit deeper into their story. And also they learn more about you. I think a lot of wineries in Central Eastern Europe have been burnt on export. There's some famous lawsuits in Tokai, among elsewhere, where people bought wine and then, legally, what are you going to do about it? And I feel like the more they learned about us, and the more I learned about them, and we could kind of, communicate that together, there was a level of trust that was built. And I think we got access to better wines that way as well. And also, like, I can stop at an Eterem here or whatever. I can figure out a menu, but to be let into someone's home for a proper dinner, or have them take you to some famous, or local, halashle place, along the river. That's, I think, also for me, what's more exciting about, like, learning about the place. When you actually have, or what's it, salona shutes, where you cook the bacon over the fire. Like, those are the moments that, like, not only the best for me, but also the stories I can tell to the buyers here that make them go, wow, what is this place? I want to learn more about it.
And maybe that's what you can maybe replicate also in the States, right?
And we have. I've replicated it. I mean, Hungary, as you know, is a land of soup. And, we actually can get some good mangalitsa lard here that's made in Nebraska. And so, we've got good onions, we've got good tomatoes, we've got good lard. Ergo, I can cook 90% of all Hungarian dishes.
True.
And, pickling and whatnot, but also we've got access to the sea. So, if there's some amazing dishes in Croatia or even Slovenia that we can get access to. So yeah, recreating those. So if I have a more authentic experience in Central Europe, that's what people really want to experience when they have the wines here. And it's not about just, being too kitsch about it. I'm not wearing a Hortobaj outfit and, sprinkling paprika on everything. Like, but there is an element of, like, if you really have the good fat, the good flavor, and the right wines, it is a pretty powerful thing. And the more you can communicate, the more you can contextualize the wines. Because most people don't know that much about these countries. Maybe Austria, there's more knowledge. But, like, once you go past the Iron Curtain, basic geography, language, everything just kind of falls away for most people. Most people can't, even educated, well-heeled people in California, you say, name a city in Hungary that's not Budapest. It doesn't come up very often. Or name a dish that's not goulash. Not so much. How do you say cheers? We know, Italian, French, even German, we know all these things. But Hungarian, how do you even say thank you? How do you say, it's not in our lexicon of things. And that's even more so when you get to Slovakia or Serbia or Romania, and also, even through the ages before Blue Danube came around, or before we came around, or other importers that you've interviewed on the East Coast, I think it's like less than 40% of Hungarian wine is exported, and probably over half of that is bulk wine from an already relatively small country. Who's had these wines? And again, there were some, iconic Tokai in California before. There's, Shepsi's been on the market here or there, things like that. But again, in minute quantities, and even me, who's seeking it out, rarely ever sees it. So it was kind of breaking a whole new category, new grapes, new places. What is this? And that's been it's been the double-edged sword. It's the most fun part of the job. And obviously, it's the biggest pain in the ass, because Imagine if I was selling Italian wines. I can just Google Italian restaurants in San Francisco and get 100 places that pop up immediately. And I don't have to explain what Sangiovese is.
Yeah.
I don't have to explain what Chianti is, you know? or so my starting place is like, here's Hungary. It's a country. It does this. You have to start at this very, very low level and then work your way up. But I think the best part about that is that it's kind of a self-selecting process for finding the people to work with that I enjoy working with the most. So the people that are the most hungry to learn, the most humbled by the fact they don't know what it is before they start, are the people that end up being the biggest supporters and the most successful supporters. You know, me trying to go to a supermarket here is a fool's errand. It's just not going to happen.
Yeah.
And that's fine.
True. And I think on a personal note, Hungary is really suffering from this, also not just as a wine exporter, but also as a nation. I think because they don't, if it's still an ongoing debate that Kadarka is a Hungarian variety or not, or Fekete Járdovány, we have in the last 10 years, we have maybe still less than 2 hectares of this grape variety, which is really great. So people cannot really define what really Hungarian wine is and what really why Hungary is really unique. So for example, that Austria does it much way better. I think they have a great grape varieties, indigenous grape varieties like, I don't know, Neuburger or Grüne Veltliner, the most famous one, but also Neuburger or Roter Veltliner. These are really unique, really USPs for Austria, and they are proud of it and they can then communicate it. But in Hungary, it's really not defined and not agreed on. And everyone is really fighting with each other, even though they are so small, or we are so small that we are even small to fight each other in the country, you know, like it's
well, I think the Austrian wine, to their advantage, that they speak with such a unified voice, and they were also backed by a really well organized and funded Austrian Wine Council, which Hungary, I know they're making strides, and I've actually been in communication with some of them, but like, you know, we've never received any support from the Hungarian government in any capacity, ever.
True.
And not that we're some, you know, huge part of the GDP, I get it, but in terms of growing this market, you know, compared to what, say, the money that Greece has spent, or Italy has spent, or wines of Portugal, or wines of Austria, you name it, you know, there's been no support. And yeah, and I think it's, again, one of the things I love about Hungary is that you get a bunch of winemakers together, and yeah, all they do is argue about the most basic facts about Hungary, and that's what makes it entertaining. But in terms of a unified, cogent message, it's a mess. Yeah. And again, I think they've done it to some degree with Furment, but I think maybe somewhat unfairly squared on Tokaj and not the rest of the country. And, you know, I personally have an obsession with Kadarka. One, because I think it also kind of ties, it shows how cross-border and interesting the area is. Like, you can find good Kadarka in Romania, Serbia, Croatia, Slovakia, Hungary. I've heard about it in Ukraine. I've never tasted. But it's a grape that, again, the roots might be Albania, Montenegro, pushed up by the Ottomans, whatever story you want to run with. It was this ubiquitous Hungarian red during the era of the Hungarian kingdom, right? I mean, it was in the coffee houses in Budapest, and, you know, Franz Liszt, these people were drinking it, apparently. So regardless of where it comes from, it has this cultural root in this area. And also the wine is delicious. And, you know, we import some of the stuff from Serbia, which is from Oscar Mauer, which is, you know, formerly part of the Csongrád area, if you want to get back into the deep of the history, but it's 1880 planted. You know, this is pre-phylloxera. Troops were drinking this and filling up their canteens en route to World War I. And the wine was already kind of considered old vine then, you know? So it's, I feel like they can't, it's hard to maybe deal with all the different borders and places, but there is definitely some grapes that have just, to me, it's, you know, however you want to say it, it is unique to this part of the world.
Yeah.
You could put Furment in that, Harslevelut to a lesser extent. And then again, to your home area, Balaton, like, yeah, there's not so much Zeus planted. Okay, there's only X amount of Keknelu. I get it. Those are the little gems, you know. We're not going to go national sales with UFAR. But there are definitely some, like, you know, Hungaricum things for sure in the wine business. And whether that also extends into the neighboring countries, I'm not so particular about. If I find a delicious Kadarka in Romania, I'm going to seek it out.
Mm.
So yeah, I do agree though. It's the lack of a unified message, and also just the fact that Hungarians can't agree on anything is part why I like it and part why I find it endlessly frustrating.
Sure. So what are maybe the qualities what you're looking for in a producers? I mean, certainly there are some business measures how much they can
Sure.
export and so on. But so what are maybe the first criterias what you're looking for in a producer?
I think I mean it's a little bit like speed dating in a way. Like you kind of know if you want to deal with this person in perpetuity. You know, there's a certain level of like, is this a good person? And you know, where's their kind of moral and political compass does matter, because especially once you start dealing with money and everything else, you kind of want to fall back on that foundation. But I would say that other than that, I think one of the largest concerns for me has been the farming. Obviously now, you know, obviously the between natural wine and regenerative soil, all these things I think is ultimately more important than say some of the maybe the small bits in the cellar. You know, I'm not such a dogmatic person about total sulfur or that kind of thing, but getting you know, really healthy land and practices would be the first place to start. So once you kind of can establish that the farming is up to par, or at least heading in that direction, you know, maybe there's investments being made. And then yeah, I do seek out mostly native grapes,
Mm-hmm.
or at least native adjacent. You know, I'm not looking for, I know that, for instance, like in Villian, they make obviously great Cabernet Franc,
Mm.
and they do, but that's not really what sways me. I'd much rather find like a good like Portugieser or something from that area. So yeah, so good farming, good people, native grapes, and obviously we're looking for native or spontaneous fermentation, wines that are unfiltered, wines that, you know, show something special about the area.
Mm.
Um,
And
like for instance, like
can I
I'm
just yeah?
you go ahead.
No, sorry, because that's so much questions it raised in my hand because I'm also looking for these wines as a sommelier, kind of.
Yeah.
So you said farming practices. That means that producers should be at least organic or at least go towards these measures, or
Yeah, ideally, I don't show up demanding the certificates,
mm-hmm.
um, and whether it's organic or biodynamic is not particular. And again, there are producers I work with where they're, you know, they've had the land, they might have 2.5 hectares, they do everything by hand, and you know, they may want to they need to make the wine and sell the wine to keep afloat financially.
Mm.
So they do want to maintain an era, like say there's a really horrible, drastic vintage. Do they want the kind of whole in case of emergency idea to use a certain kind of spraying against a penuspora or something like that? But it's so, and then and in that sense, they can't get the organic certification, or they don't want to go through the processes or pay the money. So there are weird exceptions. And obviously you can show up to a vineyard. Like if you show up in spring and there's heavy cover crops, the birds and bugs are buzzing. They have healthy fermentations. You see the kids, you know,
Mm-hmm.
running in the vineyards and eating the grapes. You know, you can,
That's a proof.
unless they're wildly irresponsible people, you can rest assured that they're not farming in an irresponsible way. But yeah, I think more and more people in Hungary are pushing for organic certification, and I also am pushing for it. I'm telling producers, I will buy more. I will do more with you if you can lock this down. But again, there are different, each situation is kind of unique. Like there's some really small, wonderful families I work with where I know that jumping through all those bureaucratic hoops is difficult. And also they might not have someone to help them. And I think what's great to see in Hungary is that some producers are now reaching out to help other producers do such a thing. And I think the more that can happen is a really strong play for Hungary. I mean, there was talk at one point of, entire appellations being organic, so I think Hungary has that capacity, and it is mostly that way, but it would be nice in terms of people who doubt more, who can't travel, who can't see, to just be able to say, yes, they're certified organic. It's done.
Mm. And the other thing is like spontaneous fermentation, because that's also for me maybe in the last year or in the last years, some kind of like a focal point, like I kind of feel that in a wine that it was like let it be, from the
Yeah.
vintner. Like it's a character. It's not a made wine, so to say, but it speaks the place, it speaks the producer, it speaks the bacteria, and it also my body feels it. It's somehow maybe it's a bit funny,
Yeah.
but it's somehow more unique, and it's more natural to my body.
And it's
And
also, if you are not farming in such a way that you have a healthy yeast population on the grapes, then you can't achieve that. So in some
true.
ways, having a really strong, robust native fermentation also tells me a little bit about the farming. And again, I know there's a lot of ambient yeast in cellars, and as you know, in Hungary, you walk into a deep old, cellar in Tokaj or Eger or Matra, and it's covered in 3 feet of mold. Yeah, there's probably some bacteria in there that are contributing to the wine. But I also feel like, well, then bring it on. Let that be the one that dominates the fermentation. You can. I would rather have that than have something push through it. And also, as you know, in Hungary, some of my favorite wines are the wines that have botrytis that it also somehow fermented dry. And a lot of commercial yeast can't even do that. You need to have this, old cellar someplace and a long, slow élevage to push these wines all the way through. And that makes them incredibly unique.
True.
So, yeah, so I think that the farming is absolutely central. And I feel like the conversation is going to go more that direction going forward. And again, there's already, there's a lot of people that complain here in California and elsewhere that, people, oh, I made a 0.0 XYZ, but they bought it from a commercial vineyard, which is more kind of important in the big picture. I'd
Mhm.
much rather have a wine that has 30 parts sulfur that comes from an organic vineyard. Or in some cases in Hungary, we're finding vineyards that have never been farmed industrially. So you don't even have the latent levels of chemical in the soil that you might find in, places that had really heavy industrial farming, whether it be, Champagne or the Rhone Valley or Burgundy or wherever. Like while they've transitioned successfully, there's a lot of trapped stuff in that soil. And I think Hungary is lucky where there's still some places that were deemed unfit for industrial production for a variety of reasons, or building back up the terraces into the forest that weren't sufficient for the Soviet era co-op tanks, So there's so much potential in Hungary if they would just kind of, I don't know, embrace it. And I do think there's a little bit of lack support from the government. I think they could really step it up and help people. I mean, a few of the producers that we have only really gone organic because neighbors in the appellation helped them do it,
Hmm.
who had already been through it. And that's just not it's a good kind of grassroots way to go about it, but it's not a great way countrywide to go about making these changes.
Hmm. Uh, Yeah, true. Let it be. I mean, I'm all
Yeah.
for these wines. And I think that's also because you don't sell to supermarkets and bigger markets, because you sell to restaurants. And I think more and more sommeliers are turning into these kind of lesser known regions, which you're not probably not gonna, these are not the first countries what you think of when you think of wine. So
Yeah.
like almost every sommelier know what is Côte de Nuit and what is I don't know what kind of appellations are in Côte de Beaune, and what is next to Pouligny Montrachet.
Yeah.
So I'm not. That would be overly too optimistic to to think that Mohacs is going to be on the wine map, on the international wine map, or in any curriculum in a WSET
Oh,
exam. But I think that's also good to have a niche to be represented on the wine list. And also, if you also have some, you have some guests who are visiting in the restaurant in the last 10 or 20 years, and you sometimes you want to show them some uniqueness. Okay, I know that you always think, I don't know, Burgundy, and you like Pinot Noir and maybe Côte de Nuit, a little bit more like, like smokiness and a bit more tannin and a bit more
yeah.
structure. So okay, then maybe I can show you a Sexat Kadarka blind. I'm not gonna tell you what the fuck is this, but
No.
I'm gonna show you, and if you like it, let's say it's also third the price, and that's a little
Yeah.
producer in a small village in the middle of fucking nowhere in Eastern
And
Europe.
yeah, and I think there's more of a table side or wine shop conversation to be had. And I
Yeah,
also feel like it's not like we're trying to replace or directly compete with those more kind of classic wines. Like I drink those wines all the time as well, but I feel like if a great way to fall back in love with the things you already know is to break out of your routine a little bit.
true.
And if you're always buying the same Pinot Noir or the same Zinfandel, the same Chardonnay in perpetuity, break out and try some of these grapes. Try a Plavat Somali, try a Poship,
Mm.
try a Pinella, try, a Harsh Levelu, a Bacator, all these different things. And if you try those once in a while, you'll go back to your Zinfandel or your Syrah and go, holy shit, these wines are amazing. And I think those who love the world of wine because it is somewhat endless and ever growing, and you're never going to get around it. You're never going to get it all. And you can devote your entire life to one area, and you probably can't even do that in its entirety. So I think people who, on the wine buying side of the business, but also customers, like it's so exciting that every time you go out, you can travel kind of armchair style. You can travel to all these parts of the world and maybe not even eat the same thing twice. And I love that part of the wine world where some people just get like, no, that this is my wine, this is my drink. That person is probably not going to come over to our side. But yeah, I love showing people new stuff. Or even me, I'm encountering new stuff still. I was tasting some skin macerated Ezeru. And I was like, what is
Okay.
this? Or, we're trying some, you find some old field blend, or even the winemaker's like, I don't know what's in here. There's some old stuff in here. And, there's, it's, or even, people planting stuff that was lost either by phylloxera or kindness, back to the matra, we've got producers planting, Feketalayanka or Purchin or, Tihani Kek and all these, or whatever it is, or even some of the red wine experiments happening in Tokai or, the list goes on and on. Even the growth of like Mezes Feher, like what?
Mm.
Can Hungarians even imagine 20 years ago that would be even a remotely talked about grape?
Mm.
And in some ways, those are our most successful wines because they are so far out of the spectrum of what we have here domestically or what we already have imported from Western Europe.
True. And so, who are maybe your most special producers, or really the underdogs?
Well, I'll get into trouble with that one. I feel like I oscillate back and forth. There's sometimes where I open a bottle of, a Samarodny, sweet or dry, and I go, Jesus, this is remarkable. There's so much history. There's so much uniqueness to it. And I would say it's more on the classic side, And then there are times where, I try a skin contact, measures Fehir under floor. And even though it's a newer kind of thing, it still connects to that dry Samarodny,
Mm.
It's salty, it's high acid, it's oxidative, it's honeyed, it's peppered. And I like when it links back to stuff like that. But I would say, grape wise, like the aforementioned Kadarka has been probably one of the most successful reds. Obviously, Kek Francos I can get from many more places, and it's a better price and often better quantity. And we do really well. We have some lovely Kek Francos. Ferment is tough in that I love it, obviously, and shows a lot of fidelity to place. But most wine lists have room for ferment. So it's a pretty high competition to fill that spot, right?
Mm.
Where they might have 15 Pinot Noirs by the glass, but one ferment is, hands up. That's as far as we're going to go down that path. I think that more and more people are traveling to the Balkans, obviously pre-COVID. But, we had a little grape in Croatia called Puship. And it's just enough like a lot of coastal Mediterranean wines from Italy or Greece, but has this just resiny, piney, salty affect to it. And we can't keep that in stock. And we're actually seeking out more of it, if you can believe it. And, people love an aged Plavatsmale. The fresher ones are a little bit tougher to deal with. But yeah, it's kind of all over the board. Obviously, right now, I think that in the kind of post-COVID environment where retail kind of reigns, it's been the light, energetic, high acid, low alcohol reds, and a lot of skin macerated whites. That is it's really driven the market, at least in the Bay Area. I know it's a niche on niche situation, but at least in the Bay Area and in Los Angeles, that has been kind of what we've been focusing on to kind of get through this this tough time. I feel like there's an acceptance of them, and without people hand selling in restaurants as you do, or being able to peruse the shelves, most people are ordering online and then picking up curbside. You can't even go into a wine shop and start looking around at the labels and turning things around and seeing what's happening. So, that's been, I think, the most successful. Trying to not say anyone in particular on purpose.
I noticed that.
But I would say, it's been surprising. We've sold some higher end wines here and there. We're still selling a little bit of even things like Asu. But really right now with the economy and the uncertainty, and obviously we're having a pretty kind of epic election about to occur here in about a week. I think there's a lot of uncertainty. So people really want the wines in that kind of $20 to $30 range, and it's hard. I think that's one of the unique things I have an issue with is in parts of these countries where in Croatia they're based, they have this huge tourism industry, right? And they're used to selling these wines to tourism, and that's a different price point. It's a different experience. People are, hey, we're on vacation, let's just go for it. That's not what I'm doing. So sometimes the pricing can be tricky. And I think even in Hungary, you're like, hey, I'm in the best restaurants in Budapest. And I'm like, congratulations. But that is not, that doesn't really matter over here, So, the pricing is always tricky. And you want to invest in people. You want them to put money back into the vineyard. You want them to put money into everything else. So it's a careful balance. And also, as an importer, there is a reputation, you don't want to become one of the late bad payers. So you want to take risks and you want to support people, but you also want to make sure that you come through. That's important. And I think that was one of the best legacies we had from Blue Danube, is that they had this huge track record of paying people, and they kind of gave us the baton on maintaining that, and I intend to keep it. Even though this year, had I known this was happening, I may have been less tentative to make that promise.
I think that's one of the best marketing activities what you can say about yourself, that or maybe what you can provide for your customers, that you pay in advance, especially in these hard times, because it's also in this part of Europe, some actualities. We are on the 29th of October in Germany. All the restaurants will be closed for about a month. Maybe it's going to happen in Austria, I don't know. So it's really, I don't know what's going to happen, and no one's going to know what's happened. But maybe just some indirect tips for small producers, what they can do that to be noticed, maybe, because I think, or what I noticed, that Instagram and social media in general, and maybe YouTube, I don't know if they make some good videos about the vineyards and really speak honestly about their practices. So what are maybe the key platforms, or maybe the key elements what a small business owner or a vineyard owner can do to be noticed in California?
Yeah, I mean, I think spending most of the energy on the farming is probably a great place to start. You know, people want to see and hear um, the kind of, you know, vibrant life that's happening on a given property someplace. To me, the biggest thing that I need to do, and again, this will be in a post-COVID world, is and I need to maybe push some of the entities in these countries, is we need to bring people over there. You know, we've been able to do it a couple times. Literally a handful of my customers who have been, you know, some of my diehard supporters have been spending a lot of energy and money with us for years and have never been in the places that they buy these wines from. And that's a regret that I have, but also we also can afford it without a little bit of some help of some kind. You know, I have friends who, you know, they buy enough of wines from XYZ country and they get a trip. That kind of environment doesn't, and I'm not looking for some sort of cheesy press junket trip, but even if I was to bring 5 buyers over or 4 buyers over to at least some help with accommodation or a car rental, you know, I'm not asking for a silver spoon, but like something to kind of be like, this can really have an impact. And I feel like there's such amazing hospitality in Central Eastern Europe, especially when you get into someone's home, that sticks with people. And even the few people that I've taken over to these countries, even years ago, are still diehard supporters. They may have changed 3 or 4 jobs. Their allegiance to this part of the world has not changed. And if I could do that with the vast majority of people I work with, that would be an absolute game changer. Because again, you know, what's my favorite Slovakian restaurant in California? I don't know. What's my favorite Hungarian restaurant? What's my favorite Croatian restaurant? There's no Little Pest in New York. You know, there's just nothing here where, you know, whether it's a lot of other countries in Europe, you can find some semblance of those environments here. But this is just totally different. And I feel like that's one of the major goals I have in a post-COVID world, is to bring people over and spend money and resources on that. So I think the more that people in the countries I work with can kind of entice people to travel would be helpful. You know, there's so much natural beauty, you know, and whether it doesn't need to be just my hands in grapes, or, you know, me walking with my dog in the vineyard. Like, we have that in all parts of the wine world. I get it. You have an old cellar, great. But like, do you have this amazing cave near you, or a mountaintop, or, you know, a castle with this long staircase overlooking something, or a local meet, or, you know, like, I've sold a lot of Hungarian wine just talking about Mangalitsa. You know, I actually spent time to go to a Mangalitsa festival and learn all about it. Or, you know, learning about the different, you know, tribes and movements, or what or like the Hortobage, or, you know, reading about George Lang, or getting people, and, you know, there's another great company that's now also in the United States called Taste Hungary.
Sure. There is a
Gabor,
great sommelier there. I did a
yeah,
podcast with him,
yeah,
Sebastian. He's actually coming from South America.
Yeah, Sebastian, yeah, he's wonderful, and everyone who works there. But I'm saying, I sent, you know, I don't know, at least 100 different people to take those food tours, take those wine tours, do what you can to, like, let them guide you through it. And, you know, I've been on YouTube stuff with Gabor, and there's a good, I think, because they really do stride the balance between American mentality and Hungarian mentality. Like, we actually work in synergy as opposed to being hardcore competitors, and it benefits the both of us. And I feel like the more the producers I work with can kind of communicate that, yeah, it's safe to come here. It's beautiful to come here. In addition to the wine, we've got these amazing goats in the hills of Tokai, or we can go down to the Tiza and have this kind of soup, or we can go to the Danube and have the same kind of soup, but it's not the same kind of soup, and talk about the different kind of cultural entities, you have in these countries. I think that's where they can really make a pitch, because just talking about your barrel, regiment or whatever, it's good, but it's ad nauseum in the world of wine. It's already out there, and I don't know where it gets you really. And to connect directly, like when I've had producers chime in when they see their wine at a restaurant, they'll just be like, hey, thank you so much from Slovenia. It still kind of matters a little bit, because people ultimately want to get as close to the source as possible. And the more of those barriers you can remove, the more they feel connected, and therefore the more meaningful it is. And then they feel like they're doing something that has purpose. Like, I'm selling this wine at this restaurant in Berkeley, but it's directly supporting this community in Slovenia and me, the in between. And I feel like it makes us all feel better, as opposed to just pouring expensive wines for somebody.
Yeah, true. And that is also like a need for your buyers, or on your buyers side, to be educated about these countries, and also maybe appellations and, I don't know, soil types and native grapes.
Yeah, I mean, we try to have one of the more in-depth websites. I mean, it's, there's a certain level of ignorance, because there isn't so much definitive works done on these countries really in the way that's been done elsewhere. And obviously, I learned from one winemaker here, and then his neighbor or her neighbor says something a little bit different. So I have to kind of, there's a little bit of trying to feel it out. But yeah, we do a lot of educational seminars for both the trade and for consumers. And the more you can kind of paint that context, like, hey, when you drive up to X and Y appellation, these are the first things you notice. These are the classic dishes of the area. Here's what you can really figure out about this place. So I try not to be too didactic, because one, I can't keep up with all the information, and two, there's not really a good aggregate source. You look at even really amazing books like, name your top wine writer, Hugh Johnson, or Stevenson, or Robinson, whoever. Hungary is, a page and a half, 2 pages, and the Jura is 15 pages. It's just not the same amount of attention. And they're getting better about those kind of things, but like, what's the definitive book on Hungarian wine or Serbian wine? I mean, Austria, I have it somewhere, came out with this not too long ago.
I have it as well here.
Yeah, like, this is a pretty definitive piece. It's pretty in-depth and pretty amazing, but like, this does not exist in the other countries that I just mentioned. And I know there's work being done. And the other thing that I can't quite wrap my head around is that there isn't really like a prominent wine celebrity, for better lack of a word, like a top MW or MS, at least in the States. I know that there are people like Elizabeth Gabe or Carolyn Gilby, MWs, but they're Europe-based, that's their market. But like, who is the person over here that's going to also champion these kinds of things? It can't be the importer. It's obviously a huge conflict of interest.
Exactly.
There needs to be, I would love for someone to come out, like maybe like in New York, that people like, Pascaline Lepatia, who does like, Loire Chenin, that's like her thing. And you could, Aldozan, this, that, and the other. There's a lot of those, name your person, right?
Yeah,
who is that for? Yeah, who is the American ambassador for these? And if they're there, please contact me. I would love to know.
Exactly. I think you just formulated a lot of messages. Yeah.
Yeah. I want to. So, and I think that will happen. It's just also a matter of travel. Like, if they don't go over there, it's not going to happen, I don't think.
No. And so, do you have any other wishes maybe for the authorities and for the government? Because I think that's a pretty good list, and I can really relate to that.
Yeah, I mean, if anyone from Hungary, for that matter, anything they can do to help kind of grease the wheels for export. You know, an American wine journalist and blogger, Alder Yarrow, wrote an article about the labs in Hungary and what they approve as a quality appellation wine. This is so backwards in so many places. I mean, I've had wines that I would import, prepaid the wines. It's all going to work out, and the wines aren't given the paperwork for export. And you know, it's like we're out on a limb trying to make this happen, and then the labs or say, you know, the Matra, this one doesn't taste like this. These are things that have to be kind of cleared up, I think. And also anything that they could do to kind of aid, you know, travel and consolidation. I mean, the warehousing, for instance, this is a niche bitch argument. The warehousing for export in Hungary is ridiculous. It's a 24-hour window. You can't consolidate and wait for things. Everyone's going to leave at a certain time. It's a nightmare. You know, where you can have stuff in other European countries slowly load up for months, and then when you have the right amount, it goes in the container and it ships. It's like very simple stuff. And since, you know, I'm importing from so many different, that kind of helps everybody. Yeah, I mean, I'm sure Catherine could complain at even greater length about that process. But otherwise, you know, like the hospitality, the risk taking, the you know, everyone who spends so much time on building community and everything else in these countries is really wonderful, and I can't wait to get back. So,
do you have any plans to get back? I mean, you have, but any specific?
I mean, this is the first year I haven't traveled at all, which has been sad. And, you know, and producers are being very kind about adding samples to different containers and trying to ship things, but it's just not the same. I don't know. I mean, schools are closed here. I don't know how I would escape until that at least happens. And obviously, you know, I can't go to Europe and be quarantined when I land, and then quarantine here when I get back. I can't leave my family for a month or more just because I want to go taste some wine. So yeah, I would say as soon as it's safe and I can do it and things change here. Yeah, I mean, I was supposed to go to the Balkans in the spring, and then I usually follow it up with something, you know, before harvest in Central Europe. And then there's some really great tastings in the wintertime in Vienna that I would love to have gone to, and that's just didn't happen. So, you know, yeah, as soon as it's safe and I can and my family is okay here, I'll be back. And at some point, it would be fun to meet up with you at some point.
Exactly, that's what I was thinking.
If
you need a translator.
You can come along and help me translate, and we can maybe dig deeper into the Balaton and or wherever. And yeah, I mean, I would love to do that. And I went over just I did a horrible like 4-day trip. So basically 2 days travel, 2 days there, just to go to this tasting in Vienna. But still, I called producers and we went out for dinner in Budapest and Vienna, and they drove down from the different appellations. And it wasn't, you know, a business meeting. We just met to talk about how's it going. And to me, that's where I find a lot of the value in the work, because I don't think people really get into the wine business to make big money fast. I think that's a fool's errand. But in terms of adding meaning and value to your job, those are the things that I feel like I'm just missing out on this year. And also with my own customers here, you know, we're sending these 2-ounce bottles in little ice chests to people and trying to talk to them over the phone about the wines are. It's not the same as sitting in person, pouring out of a bottle and seeing where the conversation takes you.
True. That's what I'm also missing.
Yeah. I mean, this podcast is great and I'm happy to be here, but it'd be much more fun to see you in Austria, go out and have dinner somewhere, go out for drinks, and then record this. It would be a different conversation.
Exactly. But maybe 2021 will be our year.
The goal. 2021, and I would love to get back over there and connect with you in person and see all the people who have been supporting me and who I have also been supporting. I think it'll be I think the other silver lining is that I think next year, or whenever there's a vaccine or whatever it happens, I think the reunion factor of everyone who survived this nonsense, there's going to be some really great lunches, dinners, and hikes and things like that. It's going to be that's going to be a good time.
A lot of egészségedre.
A lot of yeah, a lot.
Egészségedre.
Absolutely. And Palinka.
Yeah. And maybe because I know the statistics of the podcast is actually most of our listeners are coming from the US. So
oh, really?
Yeah, that was also a surprise to me. But so maybe private customers can also buy wine from you somewhere, or is it only for restaurants? And
it's only through restaurants and wine shops. We can't sell direct.
Okay.
However, it's like anyone who goes into a wine shop and says, what do you have from these countries? Or, hey, I'm looking for a good, Ufark or a Harshlevalu or a Karaka or a Poship or Karan. The more people actually just voice this, then people know that it's out there and it will make a difference. And of course, they can always contact me on the website. We have a contact us, and I can tell you where some of the wines might be. Or, people are open to special ordering these days. People really want to dig into a mixed case. We can help arrange that through some of our retail partners.
Perfect.
But yeah, we don't have like a brick and mortar or a web shop. It's a different licensing here in California.
Mm-hmm. So where can people find you?
Well, on Instagram, we're at Danch and Granger Selections. We're also on, Facebook. You can go to our website, Danch and Granger Selections. And we're really heavy in the Bay Area and in Oregon and in Los Angeles. But hopefully we're expanding that reach shortly, to be determined. But we're basically on the West Coast right now, and there's plenty of people here to facilitate that. So I think I like the idea of forging the vast majority of the relationships myself, as opposed to farming it out. So it's kind of nice to look at our account lists and know exactly who they are, where they are, and what's happening. And again, kind of like with our producers, like I don't want to just order a wine because they got a good score or they're hot shit on Instagram. You want to actually know who they are. And it's fun, even in the holidays, just get random cards or random, things. It's it's just it's better. Overall, it's just more enjoyable.
I can relate to that.
Yeah, and even I have my own personal Instagram account, which is not very wine centric at all. I interact with most of the winemakers there, not on my company page, because by and large they want to see where I am, what I'm doing with my kids, what they're doing with their family, what they're doing on their different trips, and it's so it's fun to have kind of both avenues. There's like the business side, where I'm like, hey, your wine's at this restaurant or at this whatever. Also, here's how we're living over here and how they're living over there. True. So yeah, it's nice.
Because after all, it's a people business, and you are talking to farmers, basically, right? So it's the most ancient professions, so to say.
Yeah, the wine trade's been going on for some time.
For some time, and will be going on, I'm sure.
Yeah, it's the one thing, it's like the old joke, the only stock that didn't fall when the Soviet Union collapsed was the vodka market,
True.
So
that's the Russian antidepressant.
It's fun to like dig in. I have some family history. Yes. It's also, I have some family history in the area. My great grandmother was born in Slovakia. It was then Hungary, but now is Slovakia. And then my great grandfather was born in Hungary, although we're not exactly sure where, because all the names and things were changed as the Hungarian maps changed, but also through the American immigration. But I grew up with a lot of the sounds and the smells and things like that. And even at our Thanksgiving, we always have a garlic, paprika laden cucumber salad. You know, that's not exactly a traditional Americana.
Not
So
really.
I feel quite at ease when I'm in this part of the world. I feel like the food, the weather, it jives with my DNA.
It's good to hear. Eric, do you have any like final words or final wishes to?
Yeah, I mean, thanks for having me. It's been fun listening through your podcast because there's just not that much media on this part of the world. To be honest, I'm a little starved for it sometimes.
Mm.
So I feel like that's going in the right direction, and it's fun to hear from people, even people on your podcast that I know personally. It's fun to hear them kind of talk in this more long form version and see what they're more about. And also for me, it's fun to talk about this stuff as opposed to just ruminating it by myself in my little home office, stressing out about things. It's like explaining your essay. You know what I mean? And like the more you get it out of your body, you're like, oh yeah, that is kind of why I do that. So it's good all around. And I would encourage people, whether it's through us or you find some of the wines in DC or New York, or whatever your market is. I mean, there's even a great portfolio in the South. I think it's in Kentucky or something like that, or Rooted Selections. They're bringing in some of the same people we are, but also a lot of new ones. Like there's not that we're some sort of giant behemoth, and obviously you talk to Athena at Palinkerie. We're not a massive group, but like these wines can be sought out if you just kind of put a little bit of effort in. And I think they pay back in big dividends when you actually find them.
I can really just repeat myself. Thank you very much for doing this because the wine world is going to be more colorful by people like you and by ideas and by just the effort what you put into this kind of world and how you help these people and these appellations to show their many faces. And thank you. And
well,
I hope.
Thank you so much. And don't stop what you're doing. And eventually we'll be able to cheers in
I'm sure.
in Hungary or Austria or wherever you find yourself at some point.
I'm
so
sure.
Thank you so much.
Thank you. Thank you.
Egészségedre.
Thank you, Eric. Have a great day.
Bye.